Welcome to Something to Talk About here at King's Restaurant. Of course, we have all the usuals on the table. Today, I'm going to introduce to you a couple that people that I've only recently met in person, but I feel like I've known them for several years. They've come down from Saipan, and they've got a story, I think, to tell that's pretty cool about Typhoon Sodalor. You remember what devastation that caused Saipan. I'm going to talk to Glenn and Svetlana Hunter from Saipan here on Something to Talk About. Well, welcome to Kings and welcome to Something to Talk About. Like we said, we're catching up with a Saipan couple. Actually, I knew Glenn before I met Svetlana. In fact, this is the very first time we've ever met. But Glenn and I feel like we go way back. The Hunters are from Saipan, like I said. Glenn I think you were a willing participant and a volunteer in the coverage of Typhoon Sodalor in Saipan a couple of years ago. He was a regular on my show on the radio, and he's here in Guam. So it's so nice to finally meet you in person.
Oh, it's great to meet you.
You're like everything on the radio like you are in person, which is refreshing. Same guy. But we kind of met each other through the radio. I think it was like hours after people were coming out of the typhoon, and I don't even think the sun was up before you could survey the damage. And
right.
If you remember, that was that Saipan's worst typhoon to date?
In my memory, it was. I've been there for over 40 years now.
Yeah.
And I recall Typhoon Kim, and that was a super typhoon, and that hit us straight on. And that was, in my memory, that was the strongest typhoon. I never thought I'd see anything stronger than that.
Yeah.
But Sodalor made that seem kind of easy.
Yeah. Well,
Sodalor
Sodalor was bad. I mean, and it so happened that there were some Navy assets and Marines in the area, which really lent to the early days of recovery where you might not have seen that kind of swift action or response. Svetlana, by the name, sounds like she's Russian.
I am.
And she is. And, well, how did you come to Saipan, first of all?
Well, I came out there with my mom just on vacation. That time I lived in New York City, so we just came there for a very long 1.5 month vacation. And I met him on my third day there.
Really?
And yeah, that was it.
Yeah, we had a mutual friend that brought her by. I own a little cafe out there. And so the mutual friend knew that she had a very strange diet.
Yeah.
She was a raw vegan at the time. And I was a vegetarian on Saipan, which is very strange for Saipan as well.
Yeah.
And so the mutual friend brought her down and introduced us for, to talk about foods and stuff like that. And of course, my mind was set on something else.
Yeah. Well, I can see. I mean, you're an absolute beauty. Was your mother worried that you would never go back to New York?
Well, she kind of fell in love with Glenn too.
Oh, okay.
So she did not mind.
So what did you do? You left? You went back to New York?
I left first and I went back to my hometown in Russia first because I was going to fly out from there in a week. And then during that week, we kind of Skyped each other for 8 hours a day.
Oh my God.
So I actually never went back to New York.
Wow.
I just decided
what a story.
Yes.
And how long have you guys been together then?
Oh gosh, 40 years, 50 years now?
You don't look a day over.
Oh my God. This December it's going to be 4 years since we've been married.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the one Russian that actually stayed.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, but the tourism industry was accommodating a lot of Russian travelers. But you weren't coming from an area where they were marketing for tourists to come. You were just coming from mainland USA to...
Well, my mom was still living in Russia, so
I see.
she went to Saipan. I think she came there 2 years prior to that, and she totally fell in love with the place and everything. So she said, "Let's go there." And the first time when she called me and said, and I was like, "Spain? Do you mean Spain?" She's like, no, Saipan. So I didn't even know where was it. But
Yeah.
then when we came out there, it was so beautiful. I fell in love with the place and everything.
So easily.
Yeah,
What was
so
the
easily.
attraction? I got to ask. Aside from him, what was the what was like the natural attraction to the island?
I think like the contrast with the city life. New York is very fast paced. It's a lot of hustle.
Yeah.
And it's very dark. It gets very cold in winter. So after that,
Well, not much. I mean, that's not foreign to you.
I know, but
From Russia.
now I'm
What are you
so
complaining
spoiled.
about? Yeah, the winter in New York pales in comparison to a
That's
white
so
Russian,
true.
right?
But I felt like I always wanted to live in a warmer place.
Yeah.
I really love sunlight, and I love more of an island kind of life. So I was thinking of moving to California, but I never been to Saipan. So when we came out to Saipan, it felt like a perfect place. And then I met him, so I was like, damn.
Well, I don't think that you could have seen Saipan more intimately than in its darkest days after the typhoon. Both of you sort of manned up a group of people to just go into places that most people were not going into to try to find out what the needs were. How did that, what was behind that? What was motivating you to take this effort into your own hands the way you did?
While I lived in New York City, I've lived through 2 hurricanes, Sandy and Irene. And in comparison to Sadlor and Saipan, that was nothing to me.
Yeah.
I think the scale of what happened in Saipan was so devastating. And we kind of quickly got over our own personal shock once we went deeper into the villages and we saw that. And initially that happened just kind of accidentally because we stocked up on the food in the restaurant that we own, and we just wanted to share the food because it would just go to waste otherwise. And then what we saw just shocked us, and it was a lot of Glenn's initiative, and I think he has such a big heart for people in general, and especially people in need, and that's what we saw. There was no relief, there was no help. They just simply didn't have water, they didn't have roof under, above their heads. So it was just something that I'm not used to seeing, and I was so shocked, so we just had to do something.
Yeah. Well, for you, Glenn, I know that you really took on that effort, and in the early days I could tell that it was deeply personal to you because you saw a lot of people doing without.
Yeah, pretty much. It was, like I said, I grew up out there, so I'm well aware of our limitations, like what we can do as a government and what we can do as a people when tragedy hits or when something happens. And on the same note, I'm also pretty vocal. Whenever I see something that I'm not happy with, or whenever I see something that I think something should be done, I like to just call it out. I'm pretty blunt. Again, like a vegetarian on Saipan, pretty rare. So in this case, going through the storm with my wife was a unique experience for me as well because it was her first super typhoon. And so that changed things. Like in my mind, I could live through anything, throw fear
But
to the
for
wind.
you,
But now I'm, in the back of my mind the
Yeah.
entire time, actually in the front of my mind is my concern over how she's handling this experience, how I'm going to keep her safe, that kind of thing. So that kind of shocked me as the storm approached and as it went through. So I felt that for the first time in my life, a fear, like of Mother Nature, which I don't ever have on anything.
But that
It
was
more
born.
fear for
It was born
her.
of your concern for her.
Exactly.
You were suddenly scared that you were the guy
Exactly.
that had to take care of
exactly.
everything.
And pane glass windows breaking in, anything of
Yeah.
that nature. And then in the aftermath. So after the storm passed, of course, I also have my mother lives on the island as well, and she lives a distance away from us. And so my initial reaction was, oh gosh, I wonder how she fared. She's in a house that was built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, something like that. So first thought was to go and see how she's doing. And as we made that trek down in those early hours, we got to drive through the villages and everything because the main thoroughfares were all just littered with ironwood trees, telephone poles. And so it was just that initial, leaving our place, taking a trip that should take about maybe at most 8 minutes, something like that. Ended up taking over an hour, maybe 2 hours.
By car.
Just to
try to get around the debris.
Just to navigate through
yeah.
the maze of back roads through the villages and stuff. And
Wow.
so we got to see firsthand, before anything had been picked up, before anything had been cleaned up, before anybody, as the sun was rising. This was maybe 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. We got to see as people were waking up to this, as they were coming out of wherever they were hiding, to full on, homes just completely annihilated, just gone. And And while this is all happening, we're trying to navigate down. I'm thinking, I gotta help my mom, gotta make sure my mom's okay, gotta check on mom. The residents, the people in those homes that were destroyed, were coming out into the roads and they were clearing them. So I wasn't the first. That's what motivated me. Like, they were coming out, there were times there were long lines of cars and I would stop and I would get out and I'd walk down to see what's the holdup, where, what can we do? There were people out there with machetes, with saws, pulling
Already
things off the
clearing the
road.
roads,
And,
yeah.
I remember, I get goosebumps because I remember, talking to him and I was like, well, how did you guys do it? How was yours? And he's like, that was our house. And he points it, and there's no house there, but he's here in the middle of the road trying to clear the road so that people could get through, because he knew other people needed to come through. Maybe he had family coming through. And so I remember that really stuck with me. And then I got, after the couple hours, we got down and we got a chance to see my mom. And for some reason, her area was completely protected. There was there were still plumerias on her trees, that kind of thing.
Oh,
so it was
wow.
just this real odd, surreal thing. She was way down south. And then, so after we saw her, everything was okay. I remember as we headed back to now see our business, our shack, the cafe, when we got there and there was this food that we got, like she had said, and, we had full inventory stocked, it was almost a no-brainer for me to kind of reach out and see how I could, in turn, help the same people, because some of those villages we went through went right by the cafe. Give some of this food to people that might not have those homes. And so I remember posting on Facebook, if anybody needs food or anything of that, or any necessities, give me a call or send me a message or somehow get in touch with me or come by the shack. Because we fully stocked up and we got to get rid of this before it goes bad.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine from the mainland was one of the first to reach out to me, and she said her mom lived across the street from us, and that there was a barracks of workers that had been totally destroyed, and they had holed up in a business across the street overnight, and they might be
wow.
in need. And so that was the first thing we
Yeah.
did, was we just crossed the road.
But there were so many stories like
Oh,
that, and
gosh.
it's hard to
Yeah, that was
have
just the start.
Been able to respond to everybody. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about how much first responding has changed to policies of the government, of the CNMI government, and what you can expect, if the residents are confident that in the event of an emergency, your government will be there. We're going to take a really quick break here. We'll be right back with our friends, the Hunters from Saipan. Here we are with Svetlana and with Glenn Hunter from Saipan. You own The Shack, which is it a vegetarian restaurant, or is it now a full service everything?
Gosh, it's hard to describe. We have healthier offerings. So we have vegetarian, vegan dishes. We have it's basically all around. I guess in a nutshell, we try and offer clean eating. So
Are you
it
the only
doesn't-
ones who do that on Guam, or is it?
We're one of the
in
few.
Saipan? Oh,
We're
okay.
one of the few. There are other areas that also offer vegetarian options or
Okay.
vegetarian choices. But all in all, we still have meat. We still offer some meat dishes and stuff like that, kind of yin and yang.
Yeah.
We've got home cooked meals that are just hearty and stuff
Yeah.
that people are used to. And then we've got really weird stuff, like we do savory crepes, and we do chia pudding, and we
Okay.
do some
All right.
some odd healthier items as well.
Introducing a different sort of diet, I'm
Exactly.
sure, to
Yes.
Saipan.
Yeah.
We were talking about your response after Typhoon Sudalor, and I know that one of your great frustrations was some of the deficiencies of the CNMI government to respond. It was I know we had a lot of conversations with them. There was a lot of miscommunication, because communication was an issue. Rather than go back and try to rehash what happened, how confident is Saipan that first responders will be able to meet the needs after an emergency?
Wow. Trying to think of the best way to answer that.
Okay.
An emergency like that, like Sodalor, like in retrospect, when I look back on it a couple of years ago, the devastation, that the overwhelming amount of devastation, the lack of communication, the really short time frame for residents to really understand that a large storm was coming. I mean, it was like 6 p.m. at night, and our power went out. I called CUC, and they were down there trying to fix the poles. This was just a mere hours before that storm hit. We had linemen up on the poles, so the thought process among everybody there wasn't that we were going to get hit so hard, even up till just hours before. So that in mind, the response to the disaster after it happened was probably not optimal, because a lot of people just weren't well prepared prior to it.
Right.
The government, personal people. Now, going forward, like, could anybody really prepare for that amount of devastation? Maybe not. But what we could do, I think, in retrospect, some things that we should be able to do going forward is have in place certain safeguards for when something of that magnitude hits us. Today, are we there yet? I'm not sure. I know the storm gave birth to a lot of volunteer groups, first responder groups. It also kind of was a wake-up call to our government, to some of the, the larger entities like the Red Cross, those ones that usually are there first responding volunteer efforts. So what it did is it gave us all kind of a major wake-up call. Now, how those entities are dealing with that wake-up call, if they've like put in place certain safeguards that now, should we like encounter a large storm of that nature or anything, are there certain things like say things as simple as backup supplies of fresh drinking water, or generators for the water pumps, or a way to communicate with the people in the villages that have no phones, have no homes, have no, like, do they have those things in place? I'm not sure. I'd like to think that there is somewhere, someplace, somebody has this, this little SOP guide for our government in the emergency management office or something like that they could now pull out. And they can say, hey, we just got struck by a big storm. Let's mobilize, Team A, and that's the guys that go out with the bullhorns. Forget trying to do radio announcements, forget, papers, any of that stuff. Let's go old school, let's go grassroots. Let's throw a few people in some pickup trucks with some water in the back, and let's just head through the villages and just make sure people are okay, number one, and what some of the first items that are, they could be readily available are there. And that's my hope that that's there now. I don't know if it is.
But you don't want to test whether or not it is.
No, we don't want to test it. And
No.
then I got to be honest. I got to look at myself, right? Like I said, I wasn't prepared for that personally. I didn't expect that level of storm. I was playing volleyball at the beach that evening before the storm hit. Somebody asked me the other day, am I more prepared today? It was on the anniversary. They said, am I more prepared today? Expecting me to say, of course, yeah. But the truth is, no, I don't think I am. I can honestly say I'll probably still have to wait until the storm hits and then me react the way I normally do, which isn't the way it should be. We should take these things seriously. And
Be
we
prepared,
should.
to be prepared.
Exactly.
Are you prepared to live in a land where typhoons are, part of the landscape? I mean,
Well, I hope because we got such a strong one, it's not until maybe 100 years from now that it's going to hit us again.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Did you go when you were going through the typhoon? You were like, what was I? Was this guy worth it?
No, I think I fell in love even more with him. What we've been through, the typhoon, and the way he reacted to it, the way he helped people, the way he thought of the ways to actually help people, or it was just nonstop. I felt like even though the business was closed, he was working 24/7. He was constantly on the phone, or we're going out. And my goal, personally, my mission was to film as many people as I could while we were going out to the villages so we can get the message out. Because what shocked me the most about everything is that I would try and reach out to my friends in mainland or Russia or Europe, and they had no idea, absolutely. And I would send them pictures or tell them how devastated it is, and they're like, what are you talking about? There's nothing in the news. So we were so shocked because you cannot even really ask for help because people don't even know what we're talking about. So the initial morning when we saw the typhoon aftermath, he was the one who said, take the camera. I was just crying. I couldn't, when I saw it, all those beautiful sceneries and views, they were just all gone. All the trees were on the ground. It was insane. So we took the camera, and while we were driving to Mom's house, we were just filming everything, and we posted it on the internet later. And we went to the hotel and used their Wi-Fi and everything. And people saw it and they're like, wow, we had no idea. So every time we would go out, we would just film the stories of people who went through typhoon, lost their houses, and were with like newborn babies without anything. It was insane. And we just put it out as fast as possible, all those short stories, and try to get all the news agencies around the world to see it and to show it so we can get, the very much needed help because nobody knew.
What is it like being, Russian in a community of, local folks? Are you readily accepted? Do they know the difference unless you don't speak?
I feel like I'm not very Russian or anything for that matter. I feel after moving so much and living in different places, I'm a citizen of the world. I've been very lucky and very grateful for Glenn's family. Since day one when I met them and we just first met, they were nothing but the greatest to me. They just loved me and it was amazing. And the same with the community. I think what I needed time to get used to is that everywhere you go, people know you. It's like literally you couldn't go anywhere
you're like
unknown.
the token.
Yes. So it was like, hey. So it's amazing. But everybody's so helpful and they all love each other. They all know each other. So the sense of the community is so strong in Saipan. People are just amazing. It's just like one huge family.
Are you glad that you're living, a Russian in Saipan as opposed to being a Russian living in a climate politically, in the East Coast where I don't know what the attitude is, but Russia doesn't have a very good name. You know what I mean?
I know, yes. I mean, I'm loving Saipan. I wouldn't have want to live anywhere else right now, and then we'll see where we're at years from now.
You touched on something, and that was a big one, and I forgot to mention it earlier, how thankful I was. Like she said I was going 24 hours, all this stuff. There are certain things, these lights, and you were one of the lights. That's why probably this bond is so strong. Your call to me one morning, it must have been like the second morning or something, was like, wow, somebody knows.
Well, it was a huge story, and it's
and it was
hard
so
to,
awesome.
when you see this, and you know what that feels like. We all went through Pang Sang Hua. We had Paka. We were not ready at one point, and one of those storms, we weren't ready, and we were caught. No matter how much of a veteran you think you are, when you get caught up in it, and the communication is bad, you only get to do that one time. I think. That's why I was asking you about readiness. You only can do that once in an emergency where you go, I'm never going to find myself in a situation where I'm caught, unprepared, and especially when you're talking about the health and safety, of your family. Well, I'm so glad that you guys are able to make it to Guam. Did you go to Ross?
Oh, of course. That's straight out of the.
Is that what's the order of things?
We're weird. We're foodies, so we
went all
just
the
started
places.
hitting all the little the local shops. We just
cool.
wanted to try all those.
You ate all the
new,
good foods
just really good food out here. Matter of fact, right before this, we just came over from a good friend of mine, like a sister. The whole family's beautiful. There was our family. They have a Boca Box, and we just came straight. from there.
Okay.
So good. And then you got Kings here. You got so much places.
So many places to eat and fill it. Well, how often do you get to come to Guam?
Me, not as often.
Yeah.
I come here for work more often.
Okay.
But then, I think the last time we were here last year, December, for our
Maybe
anniversary.
almost,
yeah. Well, anytime you're ready to come to Guam, make sure you call us, and we'll be making sure that you guys are in good hands. Thanks so much for helping me today do this show. It's so good to see you. It's so good to meet you. I think we're going to be friends for a long time. And that's it for us. Thank you for joining us on Something to Talk About. We'll see you on the radio next time.